Hello, I'm Robin Davis of Assuritivity Consulting Limited. I'm a partner in the GC Index and I use the GC Index and its new feature GC Translate as a central pillar in my solutions. I'm an advisor that can help you zip together the oft-afterthought people dimension upfront with the process and technology dimensions. I bring different perspectives and challenge the status quo to make game-changing improvements. Today we're going to have a look at the recruiter and exec search use case. This is a typical use case to which most people can relate, certainly from a candidate perspective. No, I'm not an HR specialist. As I said, I bring different perspectives and challenge the status quo. You're the star, I just get you to shine brighter. However, I have helped two large organisations with improvements to their recruitment processes and their communications to candidates. And I've also been a candidate myself and a hirer multiple times, so I've experienced it from those different perspectives. In our previous post, we mapped the employee journey after recruitment onto HBRs, that's the Harvard Business Review service profit chain. We revealed the related and cumulative symptoms as shown here, affecting efficiency, efficacy and probability of successful strategic delivery. So it's no surprise that many organisations have struggled, most notably with retention. For each of these stages of employee experience, engagement, retention and productivity and external service value, we've also provided various evidence and impacts which we have not shown here, but we'll summarise some of them in a little bit. We've demonstrated how the GC Index and GC Translate can effectively address these challenges throughout the entire journey, leading to improved success in delivering strategic objectives. What we're doing today, though, is focusing on the pipeline of getting these employees into the organisation. So let's have a look at some of the basic impacts that we identified in our previous posts to warm us up. Some of the impacts: recruitment. It normally costs about 20 to 30% of our salary to get someone through the door. The first year employment costs are approximately 2 times the salary. I can't remember where the references were for that, but I do have them. Employee engagement, it's very low. This was from Gallup. It can be anywhere from 11 to 20%. That's, you're looking at about 80 to 90% of engagement being lost. It's costing 34% of salary as a result. That's a big cost saving that we can actually make. Losing an employee costs 1.5 to 2 times salary. When you start to add all this up, there is a lot that we can help mitigate and eliminate and recoup some of those not losses, but to actually be more effective, cost effective, and certainly people effective. To warm us up a bit more, let's have a look at some of the typical candidate experiences, whether warranted or not, throughout the recruitment process. There's a lack of transparency, so this is typical candidate experience, lack of transparency in the hiring process, including unclear timelines and feedback, limited access to information about the company culture and values, inconsistent communication and follow-up from recruiters and hiring managers. As I said, some of this is unwarranted, some of this is in the mind of the candidate, but this is typically what they experience. Difficulty understanding the expectations and requirements of the role. Conflicting feedback or mixed messages received during different stages of the process. Bias or unconscious bias in the selection process. Uncertainty about the next steps and what to expect at each stage. Feeling like a number or a commodity, or not being treated as an individual throughout the process. Limited opportunities to showcase their contributing impact, their unique skills and their experiences. And challenges in understanding the relevance of ATS, the automated application tracking systems, and keyword matching. So how can we help to mitigate or eliminate some of these? Let's pull back the curtains and delve into the use case. We'll start by looking at the use case in simple terms from end to end. We've extended it to include the strategy to provide a reason for more recruitment. It does come into play a bit later too. So let's step through a typical scenario for this use case, drawing out some typical observations and some of those experiences, not just from me having experienced them myself, but from feedback I've seen over the years, like on LinkedIn. As you can see, this will trace the process flow that most recruitment follows. But we have included the rather more secretive arts of executive search, which certainly shortcuts and smooths the process somewhat. So let's have a look at each of the stages in that process, showing the typical actions, observations and suspicions of the various actors in the chain. We'll start with the hypothetical that a new board strategy has stated the organisation needs to focus more on quality. We'll follow this through. So strategy says let's focus more on quality. A team says, okay, we need to focus more on quality. The hirer or leader or manager of that team actually says, okay, we need to focus more on quality. We'll look for a specialist in quality. So they often get a modified, often modify a generic job spec and include a wish list for any for a well-rounded candidate, but they're still unsure on the future team balance. This normally then goes to HR or a talent team, and they revise the job spec or review the job spec, but they're looking for a balance across other organisational needs. So quite often the quality gets diluted to accommodate those other stakeholder objectives. Typically for management below, it will go for a recruiter, and a recruiter will interpret the job spec. But they often have to rely on the verbatim job spec without any deep understanding, especially if the recruitment teams, I think on average, early 20s. The nuances and key drivers are often missed from any clarification questions because they don't understand the role necessarily as much, and hence they often get misconceptions about the role and fixate on the wrong items within the role. When the candidate gets hold of the job spec one way or other, with whether the recruiter's actually engaged them or whether the candidate's seen it online, they often see confusion or mixed messages in the job spec. It's just written documentation, so they have no real idea about the team or team dynamics. It's certainly the real ones. They find it difficult to get clarification answers through the chain. But let's say our candidate decides to give it a try. So they modify their CV and the cover letter and LinkedIn profile. They will try to cover all the bases and stuff it with all the keywords that they can to try and get through the ATS hurdle. So the applicant tracking system, that often does keyword matching plus various other sort of AI-based algorithms with or without bias, depends on what they've been trained on. So it will try and infer a match from the keywords that have been stuffed in there. Quite often it may be fixated on the wrong keywords that may have been plugged in by the recruiter, and so quite often could filter out very good candidates. When it gets to HR or the talent screening of the candidate CVs, they will try and infer impact from experience, expertise and personality, whether it be the right sort of cultural fit. So they're looking for cultural fit instead of impact fit as to what they're actually required for in the job. So again, you can filter out some great candidates there. By the time it gets back to the hirer for any shortlisted interviews, again, they need to try and infer impact from experience, expertise and personality. They will often have a reduced shortlist, including some inappropriate candidates going through the recruitment arm, and interviews for roles that may not actually fit the team's needs. Obviously, you're trying to fit the job spec, but is it actually what the team actually needs? And this is typically when the candidate realises, or the hirer realises there's an actual mismatch. Then let's say the candidate does get through. they then get onboarded. So there's still some uncertainty about the exact role and team dynamics. You know, they go through probation and everything else to see if it actually is going to work out. So it takes a longer time to actually mobilise and fit in. Remember, all this time, you know, they're not being overly effective, and they could actually be a bit disruptive to other members of the team, reducing productivity. And there could be potential clashes or gaps with other members in the team. What does this mean? This means that we could end up with reduced quality and a high risk of non-delivery. For senior levels, i.e. executives, C-suite, etc., then search exec firms or exec search firms or headhunters, they're typically engaged because they will have more of a deeper understanding of the industry, of the strategy being applied by the organisation, by talent requirements, lots and lots of things. So they will obviously, because there is more at stake, they will obviously have to apply more due diligence, market research and candidate profiling to find just the right candidate. So there's a lot more direct outreach. For the candidates, the headhunted candidates, you can't get much information in the job spec, no matter how hard you try. We can improve that, which is what we're here to do. But for an executive, they typically want to find things which aren't in the job spec, that's written between the lines, that is hard to really, to really put down in words. It's more of a feeling. It's more of a, you know, what is the organisation trying to do? What is it they're not saying? So they're often more interested in the strategy, the operating model, and, you know, any of the challenges that they're actually inheriting. But it's often quite hard for the client to actually put that down in the first place, because they don't necessarily know. It's only by an expert that they're trying to hire to come in to actually do the job. It's for that person to really find out. So it's a bit of a catch-22. Anyhow, going through all the exec search, you know, whether that falls back in to HR screening or whether it goes directly to the shortlist and interview or whatever, that is immaterial. It will go back, and shortlisted candidates will get interviewed, and one of them will get the job. How can we help mitigate or eliminate some of these? Let's bring in the GC Index and GC Translate, which share a common language and framework around positive energies for the game changer, the strategist, the implementer, the polisher and the playmaker. These provide extra diagnostics to provide an extra perspective around which some obvious questions can be asked and refinements made as we go and before we commit to the next stage. What the GC Index does is measure the potential for the person or for a team to contribute an impact. So here's our impact equation for an individual, with the greatest contribution to impact at the left and more volatility that reduces that impact the more we move to the right. And here's our impact equation, a similar impact equation for a team. What GC Translate does is similar, but for written documentation, not for people, using the same common language and framework. We recognise the significant impact written communication has in shaping relationships and intentions, but within seconds we can evaluate any written documentation or even sections thereof for its energy profile. So let's go through the use case, having a look at each of these. So we've conducted GC Translate on both the previous strategy document and the new one. It indeed does highlight that they want to focus a bit more on quality, the amber polisher proclivity. The other proclivities look about the same, except for the purple playmaker in the middle. Is this what they intended? What might be the impact of that? That's for another time. We probably wouldn't know it unless we did a GC index profile on the team in question, but they already have a reasonable energy amongst them for polishing, the yellow polisher, aka quality. Do they really need to hire someone new, or do they just need to better utilise the potential they already have? That's a key question we would ask with the GC index before we even started any recruitment. In this example, in the absence of the team profile, this director or team lead or hirer goes ahead and believes that they will be satisfying their contribution to the strategy by hiring someone who's much more focused on quality. If we had applied GC Translate to the job spec or the individual thereof, we would indeed see that the hirer has indeed met this objective. This may be by luck more than anything else, but is this what they really need? Do they really need someone who's focused on quality at the potential detriment to other impact that may be required? How would the hirer know that? If they recruit a candidate that fits this profile exactly, how it could affect the balance of the existing team? This new person could clash with existing team members. As expected, HR balanced the job spec with other organisational needs, diluting potentially the main objective and payload of this job spec. Again, using GC Translate, we can see this when it's actually happened. Will this make it more difficult to identify an ideal candidate with this new job spec? Will it be sending conflicting messages to any potential candidates out there? We can address all these up front. When it comes to the recruiter, yes, they'll be using the job spec for any communication with candidates. They'll likely have been briefed by the hirer and had a chance to ask clarification questions so that they better understand the requirements. But they often do have to rely more on the job spec verbatim when looking for candidates. They also use this for setting any keywords in the ATS system. So if we were able to assess all of this, we could end up with a profile not dissimilar to this, not too far different from the HR job spec, but different enough to maybe even confuse the candidates even more. So let's say there's a candidate out there that is quite a good match to what the hirer wanted in the job spec. The candidate probably won't know, but this would be their potential to create an impact if they had their GC index profile done. Also remember, there would likely be many more candidates who wouldn't have anywhere close to the desired impact profile that the team needs, but will probably also apply based on their own interpretations of the job spec. But our candidate sees the revised job spec after maybe seeing an earlier abbreviated version and or getting a call to discuss with the recruiter and is now confused. Does the candidate think they're a good match? How does the candidate get answers to any of the clarification questions? How long does that take? It could get quite convoluted. Well, let's say for the sake of it that this is how the candidate interprets the job spec. Again, slightly different to the others, especially the intent from both HR and the hirer themselves, but it is more in line with the interpretation the recruiter had of the role. Ooh, that could be lucky for the recruiter. Despite reservations, our candidate does indeed decide to apply. Why not? There are still so many unanswered questions, but it's worth a go. Our candidate modifies their CV, their LinkedIn profile and their cover letter to try and cover all the bases, but then they all get stuffed with keywords and phrases from the job spec that the candidate thinks matches those judged by the ATS system. If we did the GC Translate on the cover letter and the CV, we could actually see that in this case, our candidate has actually represented their own natural profile quite well. In fact, very well. So that's probably unlikely to happen. So now we're on the home straight, and the candidate is hoping and praying that they can run the gauntlet of all the different hoops to maybe even get to interview and to get hired. The first of those hoops is getting through that ATS system. For effect, depending on how the ATS system was set up, we could check the impact profile of the keywords that it is seeking using GC Translate. But let's say that this ATS system is rather over keen on action verbs and words like delivering. Those mostly correlate to our red implementer proclivity in the GC index. So we all know about the children's toy that has different shaped blocks to go through different shaped holes. Do we think our candidate is likely to get through here, or would they get weeded out at this stage? Would we know an injustice could have been made? Let's take a break and have a look at the process flow for exec search and headhunted candidates. In this case, the hirer could quite easily be the very busy CEO. As explained in exec search, they often have a deep understanding of the client, the industry, the strategy, etc., and can be more focused in both understanding the requirements, eliciting clarifications, and really understanding what type of candidate would be a good match. For argument's sake, let's assume that the exec search team really do understand what the CEO thinks that they need, i.e. that this team understands all the nuances and interprets the job spec as originally planned. This is great, but it is often only achieved through very hard work, which we could help shortcut. This is the challenge, though, of relaying this to the headhunted candidate that are headhunted candidates that are identified. These often want to know much more of the context around the team in question, e.g. the challenges in teams and business units for which they'll be accountable or responsible, or with whom they will interact. This can be made much more easy if we understood the GC index impact profiles of these teams, or the GC Translate energy profiles of written documentation for those teams, like the project objectives or terms of reference or some such. Such profiles would highlight discussion points for where such challenges lie. But let's go back to the main flow. Remember, we're talking about the hoops a candidate needs to jump through. For any screening by HR, they may be likely to focus more on the cultural fit and try to infer the impact from the candidate's experience, expertise and personality, rather than the intended payload of the job spec. This is not even including the possibility of it being other people in HR or the talent team that are doing this screening to those that were involved earlier. Not only that, but such screening could be subject to unintended bias from the screener, which we may be able to spot if we knew the GC index profile of the HR screener. But let's say that this profile is effectively what HR is looking for. Do you think our candidate will get through here? After some elapsed time since going to market, the hirer receives a short list of candidates that have survived the hoop so far. Some may be close to the original requirements, but others may match the more interpreted requirements in between. Not only that, but the hirer may now have subsequently understood their own requirements better and wants to interpret their own job spec a bit differently again. In this case, the hirer may want someone who is more of a better people person. So that's the purple playmaker in the middle. Either way, the hirer is under pressure and running out of time and patience to get anyone on board. So let's say that this is now the interpretation of the impact profile for which the hirer is now interviewing. A good proportion of the interview is spent trying again to infer the impact that this candidate can contribute from our candidate's experience, expertise and personality. Not just from interviewing in person, but also from the CV and the cover letter too, trying to splice all of those together in their own head while trying to also conduct an interview. Now let's say our candidate is hired nevertheless. They got through the interview. Well done. So by chance, our candidate has an impact profile quite similar to the original high-risk job spec. This is lucky. But let's look at the resulting GC index impact profile of the team. Not much change, although we have more of the green game changer, i.e. someone that could come up with more ingenious ideas. Again, might this be lucky? But it doesn't really meet the original objective of getting the team to be more focused on quality. Look, there are little differences to the original team profile. Not only that, but let's say there was someone already in the team with exactly the same impact profile as the new joiner. Do you think this will be a good thing or a bad? Do you think they have a high probability of clashing? Do you think there could be a good resulting team culture? Do you think the team will gel well together? Or do you think before long we may actually lose one or more people from the team as a result? Maybe in 6 months, maybe a year. By the way, we can identify and mitigate this quite quickly in a team workshop. But at the end of the day, would you say that this whole process was fruitful or not? Unnecessary or not? And might the hirer also soon be looking for a new role when the strategic objectives weren't met? By the way, as stated at the beginning, the director, team leader or hirer may not have needed to do anything to the existing team, but just to ensure that everyone was engaged, doing more of the tasks that they prefer or for which they have unrealised potential, and doing less of what they don't prefer. Again, our team workshops help with this up front. Although this use case is quite long, thanks for persevering. We hope that you can see how the extra diagnostic data from both the GT Index and GT Translate can mitigate many of these challenges and confusion before they actually arise, and maybe even eliminate some of them, saving all of us involved time and money and improving quality and reducing risk. Thanks very much for your time. If you want to know more, I'm happy to help. Don't hesitate to contact me.